is Madam Anabel, and today we are going to tackle our lesson on ecology, and specifically we are going to look at nitrogen cycle. So, nitrogen cycle being our subtopic. What is nitrogen cycle? Nitrogen cycle is the circulation of nitrogen and its compound in nature. So when we talk about nitrogen, we are involving nitrogen gas. Nitrogen gas. In atmosphere, the composition of nitrogen is 78%. And in as much as the amount of nitrogen in the air is abundant, plants and animals cannot use this nitrogen the way it is. First, the gas in the atmosphere must be converted into a form that can be utilized by plants. So plants can only use nitrogen as they can only take in nitrogen gas in form of nitrates and nitrates. And therefore, for plants to use this nitrogen, they have to convert it first into either nitrates or nitrates. So these two compounds must be first of all incorporated in the soil. So when we talk about nitrogen cycle, we have four major processes. The four processes that we are going to discuss under nitrogen cycle. The first process and the most important process is called nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation. The second process we are going to discuss is called ammonification. Ammonification. The third process is called nitrification. Nitrification. The third process. While the last process is denitrification. Denitrification. So we know that during nitrogen fixation, this is done by nitrogen fixing bacteria. Ammonification we are going to discuss on its own. Nitrification is done by nitrifying bacteria, while denitrification is done by denitrifying bacteria. So let us now look at nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation occurs in two ways. It occurs in two ways. The first way is called biological nitrogen fixation. Biological nitrogen fixation. While the second one is called non-biological nitrogen fixation. Why is this first method refers to as biological nitrogen fixation? It is called biological nitrogen fixation because this fixation is done by bacteria. The second case does not involve bacteria, so it is called non-biological nitrogen fixation. Under biological nitrogen fixation, because we are involving the bacteria, there are two classes of bacteria that we are going to identify here. Now, under nitrogen fixation, biological nitrogen fixation, we also have other three ways. Biological nitrogen fixation is split under three ways. The first way is done by symbiotic bacteria. Symbiotic bacteria. This is the category where we have the rhizobium bacteria that is found in the root nodules of leguminous plants. The second case, we have non-symbiotic bacteria. In this case, it is still biological fixation, but now it is done by non-symbiotic bacteria. This category of bacteria involves the Azotobacter. Now here is where we have the free living bacteria. The third class, which is still under biological fixation, is done by some group of algae, group. The algae here, example we have chlorella. We have the nostoc, and we have Anabel. So these are classes of algae. This is non-symbiotic bacteria done by Azotobacter. this symbiotic bacteria, which we all know is the rhizobium bacteria. So all these, because they involve the living organisms, we call them biological nitrogen fixation. The other category is non-biological fixation. How does this fixation occur? This fixation is done by the use of lightning. It does not involve bacteria, but it uses energy from lightning. So the energy from lightning combines with nitrogen gas together with oxygen to form nitric acid or nitrous acid, which later converts to form nitrates. So that is under nitrogen fixation. When we come to ammonification, this is just the formation of ammonium compounds. How are ammonium compounds formed? Ammonium compounds are formed when plants and animals die. When they die through death, a process we call decomposition. So the nitrates will be released in the soil in form of ammonium compounds. The third process is nitrification. Nitrification also occurs in two ways. When ammonium compounds have been formed in the soil, ammonium compounds can be oxidized to produce nitrites. That is the first method or the first way. The second way is through when the nitrites formed are being converted to form nitrates. So those two methods, they are under nitrification. Denitrification is the process through which now nitrates or the nitrates formed are converted back to nitrites, or the nitrates are converted back into molecular nitrogen in the soil. So all of this process we can use a summary diagram in order to illustrate. Now, on the board is our summary diagram of nitrogen circulation in the atmosphere. We said that the abundance of nitrogen cannot be enough for it to be fixed into the soil. So the forms in which it can be recorded by the plants we already talked about. Now nitrogen is being fixed in the soil in three ways, and the arrow shows the direction of fixation. The first one is through living bacteria, which forms ammonium compounds into the soil. The second one is through rhizobium bacteria that is found in the root nodules of leguminous plants, and that is why we are finding nitrates in plants. The third method is through lightning. When the energy from lightning combines with the nitrogen gas together with oxygen, they form weak nitric acid, which combines with the chemicals in the soil to form nitrates in the soil. So nitrates are now found in the plants. So the big question is, how is this nitrates? This is plant proteins. How will the plant proteins in the nitrates in plants reach the animals? The animals can only get these nitrates through feeding. So Y here is representing feeding. The process there is feeding. Now, when plants and animals die through a process, then they decompose, the process of decomposition, and in the help of saprophytic bacteria, that is the bacteria and fungi, they decompose to form ammonium compounds in the soil. That process through which plants and animals die to form ammonium compounds in the soil is called ammonification. That is when we have ammonium compounds in the soil. Now, from ammonium compounds, we need to form nitrates and nitrates. So, nitrification now starts from here. So, the process of nitrification is divided into two. We have the first one where ammonium compounds in the soil are converted to nitrites in the presence of nitrifying bacteria, that is Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus. That is the first stage of nitrification. The second stage of nitrification is whereby the nitrates are now converted to, the nitrites being converted to nitrates. That process also is called nitrification because it requires a nitrifying bacteria. So the bacteria involved in conversion of ammonium compounds to nitrites are two. The first one is Nitrosomonas bacteria. The second one is called Nitrococcus bacteria. From nitrates that are formed, we are converting them further into nitrates. The bacteria involved in that process is called Nitrobacter bacteria. Now, after nitrification, the fourth process is denitrification. Now, denitrification is whereby we either convert nitrates or nitrites back to molecular nitrogen in the air. So we are converting it back to nitrogen in the air, and it will be released back into the atmosphere. So So when the nitrites are converted back to molecular nitrogen, that is the first stage of nitrification. Also, nitrates can be converted back into molecular gas. That is another process of denitrification. Another way is when nitrates are converted back to nitrites. That process also is called denitrification. So generally, our diagram will look like this. So the process represented by Y is feeding. The last point is X here. How will nitrates in the soil reach the plants? Soil and plants. What method will the plants get nitrates from the soil? The only possible method is by absorption. Absorption. So the nitrates in the soil will be absorbed by the plants. That is how the protein is incorporated into the plants. And that marks the end of our discussion today. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to our various videos.